Ah, the priest, the staple healer on any vanilla server that everyone laughs at if they're not a dwarf. And why is that? Fear Ward. While in later expansions every priest has Fear Ward and it's used regularly, in vanilla it's only dwarves that get it. Season of Discovery looks likely to change that though, as in a recent interview with the devs they said there will be discoveries in the form of shrines and religions which could allow priests to swap their racial ability. Now this would be a game changer, because if you can be something like a human priest where you benefit from the extra spirit but also pick up Fear Ward at later levels, you're going to be laughing. The priest in Season of Discovery doesn't get any wild changes like rogues, warlocks and shamans being given the ability to tank, but every rune is impactful, building on an already big toolkit of healing spells if you plan on healing, or making Shadow look extremely advertising if you want a DPS. I do have one concern about Priest though, and it is a big one, but that will be made clearer as we work through the runes aimed towards Shadow Priests in particular. So grab a drink, click that subscribe button, or you might as well like the video while you're down there, because if you like Priests and you like Season of Discovery, you're probably going to like this. And let's have a look at the runes that the Priest is going to get in Season of Discovery. Very briefly, what are runes? Runes are going to be discovered from exploring, doing new quest chains, finding them hidden perhaps in dungeons or raids, as well as other sources, which I'm sure we just have no idea about yet. Runes will be coming to more slots than just hands, legs and chests in future phases, but in phase 1, that is what we're working with. On each of the 3 pieces of armour being chest, hands and legs, you're going to have 4 different runes to choose from. Starting with the gloves, because I do believe that this is probably going to be one of the first ones you pick up. Circle of Healing is going to be the first option, and to be fair, we're probably all familiar with that spell. It's an AoE heal where it heals all of the target player's party members within 15 yards of the target player for X amount of healing. It's incredibly strong, but it's also going to be incredibly expensive because it does cost 21% of your base mana. And this is something that I've spoke about in another video. Well, it was actually in a podcast, and I took a little clip out of the podcast and posted it a couple of days ago. But all of these runes, because it don't look like you actually go to the trainer to learn new ranks, they are going to be base mana cost. So some of them you're going to have to use quite carefully, because you can't downrank. There'll be no ability to downrank. You'll always be using the max rank, which obviously is going to be expensive when it's using 20% of your base mana, and you're not going to have that much intellect raising that base mana, especially when you're only level 25. But still, for you healers, Circle of Healing is going to be absolutely amazing, and it's going to be fun to use in both dungeons and raids. Next up, for Shadow Priests, or just anyone wanting to do some damage really, we've got Mind Sear, which causes an explosion of shadow magic around the enemy target. It does shadow damage every 1 second for 5 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards around the target. Now, the only one thing that I think is a bit of a shame here is that we got the poor man's version of Mind Sear. So we've got the version that you'd have in Wrath of the Lich King, where it has to be targeted on an enemy. So that enemy that you're targeting will take no damage from Mind Sear, just all the enemies around it. What would have been nice to see is the Cataclysm version, where actually you can cast it on a friendly target. So if a tank runs in, you could cast it on the tank, and it's going to hit every mob equally. Not a big deal, just a minor little complaint. If your favourite spec is a Shadow Priest and you want to play Season of Discovery, you're going to have an AoE now, which still is absolutely amazing. Next up, again, not an unfamiliar spell, but Penance. Launches a volley of holy light at a target, causing holy damage to an enemy or healing to an ally instantly and every 1 second for 2 seconds. It is actually one of my favourite looking spells that a priest has ever had. It does look like it's going to be on a 12-second cooldown, and it's got a 16% base mana cost. So again, while in Wrath you want to just use this literally on cooldown, you've also got a lot of intellect to go along with it to enable you to use it on cooldown. I think you're going to have to use this quite intelligently. And the final option is Shadow Word Death, and this is the point where I'm going to talk about my concern. So firstly, Shadow Word Death is a word of dark binding that inflicts shadow damage to the target. If a target is not killed by Shadow Word Death, the caster takes damage equal to the damage inflicted upon the target. So I'm guessing if you've played any version of World of Warcraft that isn't vanilla and you've played a Shadow Priest, you'll be familiar with what Shadow Word Death is. But just onto my concern while we're on this ability. As we work through all of these runes, be it gloves, legs or chest, none of them seem to have anything that's going to aid a Shadow Priest's mana regen. Now, we know there's things like Seal of the Martyrdom, which a Paladin may be using, which does grant mana to the party, but the Shadow Priest hasn't got anything to actually be sort of self-sufficient. The reason I wanted to talk about this when it comes to Shadow Word Death is what they could have done is actually incorporated a talent from Cataclysm called Masochism. Now, what Masochism actually does is gives you mana when you deal damage to yourself with Shadow Word Death. So whilst it's sort of meant to be an execute ability, you could also use it to get mana back. That is just a thought. They're probably not going to change it because we're so close to release now, But I think Agrand or Blizz in general, if you're watching, I think priests might need a little bit of help on the old mana side. But moving on to the chest, first up we've got Serendipity, where healing with Flash Heal reduces the cast time of your next lesser heal, greater heal, or prayer of healing by 20% for 20 seconds, and this stacks 3 times. Now it's interesting because what's been changed with Serendipity here in comparison to later expansions is they've also added lesser heal and heal into the mix. Ordinarily, it's just greater heal and prayer of healing. Now, on the basis that it looks like it's only rune abilities that are going to have a base mana cost where you need to be careful when you're using them, the existing spells as of this moment in time when you're looking on Wowhead all have an actual mana cost, meaning you can downrank. Don't get me wrong, they could go along the lines of making everything a base mana cost by the time it actually launches, but as it looks at the moment, you could downrank Flash Heal as an example. So you could pump out really quick, fast rank 1 Flash Heals for minimal mana, to then directly afterwards pump out a really fast prayer of healing. Or if the tank was in trouble, obviously it would be a greater heal. But you could try and be really mana efficient by using low rank Flash Heals to then give you a quicker, higher ranked heal or higher ranked lesser heal, whatever way round, just to keep a constant stream of healing on the tank. Next up we've got Strength of Soul. Now Strength of Soul was actually a talent that was added in Cataclysm where your lesser heal, greater heal and flash heal reduce the remaining duration of the weakened soul effect on the target that you've healed. So as an example, the point of this would be to put a shield on the tank, you would then spam some heals or lesser heals into it to get rid of that weakened soul effect, and as soon as the shield drops, boom, you're renewing it with another one. There's not really much to say there. I don't see this being that powerful. I mean, I probably, if I was healing, I would prefer Serendipity, but it's nice that it's there as an option. Next up, you've got Twisted Faith. Now, Twisted Faith is just basically the same as the Wrath of the Lich King talent, but minus the extra spell damage from Spirit. In Wrath of the Lich King, it does give spell damage based on Spirit, but here it is just a flat 20% extra damage with your Mind Flay and Mind Blast to targets affected by your Shadow Word Pain. Now, on the basis, Mind Flay and Mind Blast are going to be your 2 most damaging spells, giving them both 20% extra damage. It's kind of a no-brainer, even when we look at the very last rune, which we haven't covered yet, but I think Twisted Faith is going to be almost just a must-have as a Shadow Priest, as long as you're not Ohm. But the last one is Void Plague, which afflicts the target with a disease that causes X amount of shadow damage over 18 seconds. Now, you're probably thinking, well, this is basically just Devouring Plague. Well, yes and no. Devouring Plague obviously does exist in the game, even though it's only for undead priests. Like I said earlier, later on in the phase, or even in a future phase, you might be able to get Devouring Plague no matter what race priest you are. And even though Devouring Plague's on a 3-minute cooldown, how amazing would it be having Shadow Word Pain up, Devouring Plague, and Void Plague? That's just going to be a nasty amount of dot damage, which you can then just top off with some Mind Blast and Mind Flays, and things are probably just going to die. I think overall, the choice of chest runes is pretty basic depending on what spec you're playing. Strength of Soul, I'm sure, will have a place, but I think most healers would just naturally run Serendipity. And I think fight-dependent, Twisted Faith and Void Plague can be mixed in and out. And the reason I say fight-dependent is Void Plague could be used on heavy movement fights, whereas Twisted Faith would be used on fights where you don't need to move as much. Because remember, if you're putting Void Plague up and then you've got to move, you're getting the full benefit of that rune. If you're having to move when you're using Twisted Faith, well, you're just losing damage. And then finally, bringing us to the leg runes. I'm going to leave Homunculi till last just because that is really interesting. So let's start with Shared Pain. So Shared Pain basically allows your Shadow Word Pain to afflict up to 2 additional nearby targets within 15 yards. Pretty basic. You put Shadow Word Pain on a target, and if there is any other targets nearby, they're also going to get Shadow Word Pain on them, up to a maximum of 2 extra targets. Now, this is great, but it depends on how hard some of this stuff's going to be. So this could be an absolute nightmare if it hits CC targets. So if a mage has got a target polymorph because it heals and you don't want to deal with it until later on in the fight, and you've got a Shadow Priest using their Shadow Word Pain and then it's putting it on the sheep, that'd be a nightmare. As long as these things can't hit targets that are in CC, then there's no issue. And looking at the way all these classes look like they're going to play, everyone's getting AoE, everyone's getting cleave. There's probably not going to be that much CC going on anyway. But on a 3-target cleave boss, Shared Pain is going to be absolutely amazing, as is it going to be amazing in dungeons. Next up, we've got Prayer of Mending, another old familiar spell, where it places a spell on the target that heals them for X amount of healing the next time they take damage or receive healing. When the heal occurs, Prayer of Mending jumps to a party or raid member within 20 yards. And this jumps up to 5 times and lasts 30 seconds after each jump. This spell can only be placed on 1 target at a time. If you're a real die-hard priest, did you notice the one thing that makes this absolutely amazing. Assuming it goes live like this, it has been changed to be the next time they take damage or receive healing. So currently, a really irritating thing about prayer of mending is when it jumps to someone and they take no damage. So you have no control over being able to force that prayer of mending off of them. You need to just put a new prayer of mending out. Now, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, this spell costs 15% base mana, so you want to make sure this does jump 5 times. So the fact that if it jumps to a range, let's say it jumps to your mage and your mage is taking no damage, you can quickly throw a lesser heal or a really cheap heal onto them to force that prayer of mending to jump again. Now that's huge, and I truly believe that that is probably Blizzard really looking ahead and thinking, some of these healing spells are really good, but you're not going to be able to use them on cooldown like you would use them on cooldown in Wrath of the Lich King or in Cataclysm or in whatever. And I reckon they've added that little receive healing in there just to compensate for that. And just in case you're interested, I even checked the retail version of prayer of mending to see if it does the same thing, and it doesn't. In fact, I checked through every patch change that Prayer of Mending has ever seen and can't see anything where this has actually been a change in the past. So this is completely unique to Season of Discovery, assuming it goes live how it reads. Next up, a big complaint from me. Me complain? I know, never. Power Barrier. This is an absolutely amazing ability. It summons a holy barrier to protect all party members at the target location for 10 seconds, which reduces all damage taken by 25% and preventing damage from delaying spellcasting. Now, not only does this ability look amazing, it is an incredibly powerful raid cooldown, and it's one that you want to feel powerful using. Now, my complaint with it is how it reads. It reads as protecting party members at the location. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that probably means raid as well. Going back to Prayer of Mending, that actually reads as party or raid members, and there's loads of other abilities that read as party or raid. This sounds like it's party only. Now, my complaint about it is this should be raid wide, because there's a big bubble that everybody can stand in and they know they're going to take reduced damage. This could get really confusing if a priest puts it down and you think, you're going to go and stand in it and you're going to take reduced damage, but it's actually only 5 people, a single party out of, let's say, 10 of you, if you're doing BFD, that are going to actually benefit from it. So this could force people to stack that don't really need to be stacked. They're wasting time running over to the barrier when they're not actually in the same party as the priest. So unless this is trying to encourage having multiple priests, in which case it's such a powerful raid cooldown that you'd almost want one priest in each group, or one priest in most groups, to be able to power barrier their entire group. I don't know. I just feel like it should be raid wide. Let me know what you think in the comments, because I think that's going to be a really clunky one to have as party only when it's visible to everyone. And then finally, the one that I wanted to finish on, because it's a brand new ability. While we've seen ones like it, kind of, we've not seen them work quite in this way. What this ability does is it breaks off splinters of your soul to animate 3 miniature copies of yourself that attempt to attack your current target with a mace, sword, and axe, reducing the attack speed, attack power, and armor, respectively, of any target they hit. I'm really intrigued to see how this works, because reducing attack speed would be Thunderclap, reducing attack power would be, let's say, Demo Roar, and armor would, of course, be Sunder Armor. Now, this is quite a long cooldown, because it's on a 2-minute cooldown, so every 2 minutes you're going to be able to use this, but if you've already got a warrior in the group keeping up his Sunders, keeping up his Thunderclap, and his Demo Shout, then you're only really benefiting from the damage that the 3 little splinters are doing, which we don't know what the damage is going to look like yet. So what I'm actually hoping is this is a raid-wide damage increase. I know it's only really going to affect the melee, because it's going to further reduce the armor of the bosses, but it's also going to be used as a defensive cooldown, because your tanks are not going to be getting slapped as hard or as fast, but it would rely on its stacking with existing debuffs. So I'm hoping that thought has been taken by Blizzard, and it's basically a weaker version of Demo Shout, Thunderclap, and Sunder Armor, so it's not going to be as powerful as the ones that the Warrior does, but it will stack with them. Now, outside of my concerns about mana for Shadow Priests, I think they're looking in a really good place, and there's been sensible changes to these new abilities that have been added, such as the Prayer of Mending change, I think is going to get priests off to a really good start. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm covering all the classes. If you haven't seen the other ones, obviously just go and find them on the channel. They've all been posted in the last few days, and I'm going to actually combine all of these at the end. So once I've finished all 9 classes, I'm going to put all 9 into one video, but with some minor revisions of things that we've learned since they've been posted, or discussions that I've had with people in the comments where they've come up with really good ideas about some things I might have misinterpreted. So I look forward to that, because that's going to be a couple of hours long. It's going to be a big old video for you to enjoy. So again, just be sure to like and subscribe. Check out Rested XP. So Rested XP, the guide is free from 1 to 20, by the way, and obviously the level cap's only 1 to 25. So you're going to get the majority of the 1 to 25 for free. So if you don't already use Rested XP, I'd definitely download it ready for Season of Discovery. Obviously, if you want the 20 to 60 portion, you can then buy the classic Season of Mastery or classic era speed leveling guide. Lovely stuff. See you on the next one.